You're listening to Generation AI
from LivePerson.
Hi, and welcome to Generation AI. I'm Joe Bradley, and I'm joined with my co-host Ruth Zive, and together we're going to bring you on a ride through the world of artificial intelligence. Our goal is to separate fact from fiction and learn a little bit about how AI is coming to life in the real world and in real business contexts as well. We're going to bring you some of the greatest technology and AI leaders in the world to help talk about that together and to learn. So with that, let's get started. Ruth, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. It's great to be here. So Ruth and I are both so excited to get going on this podcast. I think it'd be great to start with a question, Ruth, that just I'd love to hear your take on. I know I've got my own, but I'd love to hear yours. Why now? Like, why do you think this is the right time for a podcast like this?
Yeah. Well, first of all the cool kids do podcasts, so of course, we want to be amongst the cool kids. But quite aside from the fact that podcasting is just, I think, a really great medium, there's no question that in the last 6 months or so, the world has just exploded in interest relative to AI, generative AI. It's almost as though overnight everyone's eyes were open to the possibilities of this technology. I know that when my 76-year-old mother and my 19-year-old son are both asking me questions about this, that something really remarkable has happened. And we happen to both work, Joe, in the field. And so I think it's just a very ripe opportunity to get out there and start having those conversations, to share some of our perspective and to cut through the noise and the BS. So that's why I'm excited. That's why I think right now, and I think we've got some great perspective to share with the world about this very exciting new technology. What about you? Why are you excited to do? What's the why now from your perspective?
So yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you that AI is undergoing a sort of massive transformation, and it's kind of exciting the imagination of humanity in ways that I think a lot of us in the field have kind of imagined that it would or should or maybe has for some of us, but it's becoming real in the lives of real people, and that's a fascinating time to talk about it. I think the other reason this is so important or so interesting to me is we're going to get to talk to some great guests, and one of everybody's favorite quotes is "the future is here, it's just kind of distributed unevenly," right? That great William Gibson quote. And I think that's especially true right now because with the pace of the way AI is evolving, you have people that could literally be down the street from you that are using the technology in radically different ways than you know how to use, or a company that is your competitor that's using this technology differently than you are, and is maybe gaining a massive advantage very quickly that you could catch up with almost just as quickly if you're kind of in the know and if you're aware of what's going on. But since the technology is so general and so broadly applicable, particularly the language model space is like this, just ferreting out what really works and what really is a powerful use case versus what kind of fizzles is a process of maybe a little ironically talking to humans and figuring out what's working for them. So I think it's a good time to get into the space, and it's a good time to kind of share the knowledge, maybe now more so than ever before.
So it sounds like what you're hoping to get from our guests directly is that practical insight into how it is that we could leverage that technology. So what are these practical, real world applications? Because there is, as a marketer, sometimes I feel almost responsible for contributing to the buzz. I am
Yeah.
responsible for some of that. And I think that I agree with you. It feels as though something's shifted, and now it's time to sort of figure out how this can be applied in a real world business context. So I know
Yeah.
I'm hoping to take some of that away from our guests.
Yeah, it's like goals and trajectories, right? Like you have the hype kind of sets the city on the hill, and it's not like that's not useful. Like you got to have that big vision and be like, this is what the future could be. But then to your point, like I really feel like as you start approaching that city on the hill, you find a trajectory through the examples and the concrete things that are really working with the technology, and that kind of changes your pitch, right? Your attitude, so to speak, on where that trajectory is headed, and then as that goes, like the city on the hill kind of evolves to match
Mm,
the reality. So it's kind of like that next step forward for like really taking the journey. We kind of need to get down to that nitty gritty detail a little bit, and hear from the people who are doing it.
yeah, I like that. Let me ask you a different kind of question. You've been in this field for a while, but what's your first memory of AI?
Yeah, no, for me, it's well, first of all, I'm kind of memory impaired,
Oh
so
my
I
God,
have a
I
I have
have the same thing. I always tell people I have amnesia about most of my life.
Yeah, it's sort of frustrating. Like I get this with my wife a lot. I'll talk to her and she'll be like, "Do you remember? Do you remember?" And I'm like, I know." And it's a little frightening and scary in some ways, but it is just kind of who, it's not new. It's I've been this way since as long as I can remember. Um, so I'm bad at remember when, but I definitely do remember when I was a physicist. I used to be a physicist, and I started to learn about machine learning. For me, that was it. So my way into this was through the math, right? Because I was doing a bunch of statistical analysis on data. I was measuring, heavy elements and trying to understand electron bonding and doing all this stuff. And I started to realize these machine learning techniques could help do that, and help analyze data in ways that I couldn't really set up a model cleanly enough for myself, but the system could begin to learn the model. Now that's a very like narrow space, but it was fascinating to me that I couldn't tell the computer how to kind of manage and describe this problem, but the computer could learn to manage and describe this problem if I gave it like the right foundation and basis to do it on its own. And that kind of led that in part is what led me out of the field of physics and into the field of into business, and eventually deeply into AI.
Oh my God, I have
How about
such a
you? Like, what's your first memory?
my answer is so different to yours and so
That's
embarrassing.
good. That's
So
good. It's
I
supposed to
don't
be. We're different people.
I don't come from a background in physics. Um, and I don't really think I can't pinpoint my first memory of AI per se, but I do remember as a child, that stereotype of the robot and this, even in cartoons, like what a robot looked like, and even the notion of that type of automation that you could
Yeah.
ascribe human qualities to an artificial being. I remember one
Yeah.
year for Halloween, I dressed up as a robot. I like took boxes and made like three tiers, and I was like that robot. So I always had this like awareness of, this very, very basic sort of primitive idea of artificial intelligence that to me was about that stereotype. And it was only
Yeah.
much, much later in my career when I started working in software, where I started to hear about these companies leveraging AI, and didn't altogether understand. I didn't have the same context or knowledge that you did. It took me a while to really understand what it was and how it was going to change the world. So it's probably only in the last maybe 10 years that I've had that awareness.
That's cool. You that I mean, I think it's fascinating how different things can be for different people, or different ways in. But you also awakened an older memory. You helped me with a remember when you're talking about that with your robot costume story, because it reminded me of reading iRobot and some of the Isaac Asimov stuff, and like getting really into his as a younger man, right? In college, I think I was reading this, or maybe in high school. And I was high school actually, and just getting really interested in like, well, how do you distill? He's got these three laws of robotics. Like, how do you distill what is good into some clear rules that an artificial system could follow? Is really fascinating. And then I was even more fascinated by the fact I was doing like a poetry thing with one of my English teachers, an independent study, and I was reading Isaac Asimov's annotated Paradise Lost,
Mm,
Milton, right? And I remember being so fascinated that this author was like on the one hand like way into something so science fictiony and robotic, and on the other hand like way into something so human. Like what's more human than like a story about religion and
yeah,
derived from the Bible and all that. And I remember just like kind of being fascinated by that duality, and I think we see that play itself out in how AI is coming to life in the world, right? That it's telling us so many things about who we are in reality
agreed.
that we might not have expected.
Love that. So what's keeping you up at night about AI? What are you excited about, and what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I think it's hard to kind of overstate the possible risks and really hard to understand the realistic risks at the same time with AI. So one thing that keeps me up at night is, kind of probably the same stuff that keeps everybody up at night, which is like, what if these systems learn how to, manipulate their own source code and have access to the internet and can start doing things with like global scale technology and, and leveraging that in ways that we don't expect or want. But another thing that keeps me up at night that's maybe like one level above that in abstraction is, what if, like, how do we know what's realistic to be afraid of? And if we don't know what's realistic to be afraid of, are we going to put enough attention on it and be ready for it? Whether it's the absolute doomsday scenario, whether it's bias in treatment, or whether it's something else entirely, data privacy, or there's like all these dimensions, and this is another place where separating kind of the truth from the hype and learning about how that trajectory really goes is probably going to help us. And I think another reason that a podcast like this is maybe a good idea right now.
Agreed. I bring a bit more of a, I guess, a selfish or myopic perspective to the question.
Go
Um,
ahead.
because I actually don't find myself worrying too much about those doomsday predictions that AI is going to destroy the world. I don't know if that's naive of me. What I worry about more is, will I learn enough quickly enough that I could stay on the leading edge and be relevant in my field? Because I do believe that
Mm,
this technology is going to transform marketing, certainly, but so many different aspects of business. So it's almost as though the things that keep me up at night are also the things that excite me, because I see so much opportunity and possibility on the horizon, ways that we can become more efficient, ways that we can collaborate better, ways that we can even be more creative, and stretch ourselves. But it really requires that you roll up your sleeves and learn the technology and not be scared of it. And
yeah.
I want to hold myself accountable to that expectation, and push myself outside of my comfort zone, because I see the opportunity, if that makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, and I think you're articulating something that, goes way beyond just us, that's actually systemic about this technology too, right? That there are articles being written now about who, what part of the workforce gets left behind
Yeah.
in an AI kind of revolution. And I think that is something that we all have to kind of, that's one in the category of things to be worried about, that we all have to kind of cope with. Jobs will change. They will
Yep.
probably change a lot. They may change more faster than they've ever changed in history. And how we all come to grips with that, and what happens to us in that revolution is, yeah, it's uncertain enough as to be quite frightening, I think.
Yeah. I agree. That'll make for a good podcast episode, that topic.
Yeah, who's the robot taking over for, and what happened to them? It's also
That's
be a
right.
good Black Mirror episode, maybe.
Have you watched all of the latest season, by the way?
I haven't watched the latest season. I keep meaning to, but I just haven't.
It's
I've been
very
busy
dark.
building generative AI, Ruth. I really want to watch it though.
So, Joe, I'm going to ask you a question that I know we've been asking our guests. Um, tell our listeners, what is one thing in your life that you would absolutely automate if you could, and what is one thing that you would never automate?
Yeah, I think I think it's a really good question, because it just sort of, it's one of these like AI questions that really just tells you about the person a little bit, and what they care about, what they like, what they're good at, what they're not. And my answer is definitely, I feel like, reflect that about me a little bit. So I think one of the things that we're all bad at, and that I'm bad at too, is like knowing enough about a subject to really frame it up quickly, and like speak intelligently about it. And we all think it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, we all think that we know more than we do when we don't know anything about something. And so the thing I'd like to automate, it's a little abstract, I know, is the ability to kind of like create all that context, right? And to have that baseline of human knowledge kind of at your fingertips, as you discuss something. And it's part of the reason that I'm excited about some of the work in large language models. Hallucinating though they may, or hallucinate though they may, they offer like a way to kind of quickly, if we can get them to stop doing that, to quickly come up to speed on the breadth of human knowledge and like stand on top of that much more quickly. So as a learner, I really like that. The stuff I wouldn't automate is, and I don't know if it's like one thing, but I wouldn't automate things that like, I think about like travel, right? And one thing that like makes me unhappy, like when I started traveling internationally more, which is now like 15 years ago, after I got out of grad school and finally could afford a plane ticket, you didn't have like Google Maps everywhere. You didn't have, really translation apps that worked as well. You were kind of out in the world alone a little bit in a
Yep.
new place, and you could get lost, and you get lost in
I
like,
had
the
a
interaction of,
folders.
oh
Remember
yeah,
those? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I used to have those too. So you could get kind of lost in a lot of different ways, and there was a mystery in that, and kind of an excitement and an openness that creates in your mind about the experience, and a willingness to kind of be present in the place. That I feel like the more we automate and the more we kind of make everything more uniform about how humans interact, whether it's like, the same restaurants all over the world, or just make it really easy to get around and like not have to talk to anybody in a foreign country, stuff like that, I feel like risks taking some of that mystery away. And that makes me a little sad.
Wow.
What about
Once
you?
again, yeah, once again, my answers are so different to yours. It's a good glimpse into how differently we think. What I would automate, I'm a very sort of orderly and clean person. And I think
Hmm.
if I could, I would automate like all things housekeeping.
Oh
like
yeah, good one.
like laundry and cleaning the kitchen and dishwashing and all of that stuff. If there was a way where I could just automate that and have it done all day long whenever I needed it to be done, I would love to do that because I don't
Yeah, really
particularly
good
like
one.
doing those things. And what I wouldn't automate, I guess this is somewhat similar to yours. I love eating. I love food.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I wouldn't want us to get to a state, even now, I see some of this, the way people eat and all of these like nutritional fads and, intermittent fasting. And there are all these like different, very regimented ways that we're being prescribed to eat and to consume our nutrition. And to me,
Yeah,
eating is just such a sensory romantic experience
yeah.
that I wouldn't want it to change. Preparing food, eating food, indulging, like I wouldn't want that to go away where we're suddenly just taking some sort of pill or an injection and the whole thing is just very automated and regimented.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll go even one further. I so strongly agree with that. I can't. So I think that one is kind of similar.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't automate, at least not all the time, even cooking, right? Even if I could go in and be like, have the old Star Trek like food creator thing, whatever they
Yes.
called that, and like punch up like the best meal in the world. Like I wouldn't want that to be how we prepared food, because for me there's like that process of doing that, and like the process of learning how to do that, and even the process of like making mistakes while you do that, and getting it wrong, and like there's meaning in the exploration, and there's like, I think there's this real risk of AI, you know, taking that away on actually a lot of fronts, where like the learning and the failing your way to success is part of what we come to derive meaning from as creatures.
I so agree. I so agree. And that's probably a good way for us to end today. We should share with all of our listeners that they can follow and subscribe to this podcast in all of the places where they listen to their most favorite podcasts. And please do leave a review if you like what you've heard. And you can follow both me and Joe on LinkedIn. Send us a message if there's an AI topic that you're hoping that the show will cover. And I would like to share with all of our listeners that our next episode, we will be joined by Miriam Vogel, who is president and CEO of Equal AI, as well as chair of the White House's National AI Advisory Committee. She'll be our guest. It's going to be a very interesting episode, so everyone should tune in.
Yeah, we're
Joe,
gonna
I love
start.
doing this with you.
I love it too. We're gonna start right in the thick of it: politics, AI, the global reality of all that, with someone who is closer to it than than certainly anybody else I know, and probably anyone you're ever likely to meet. So super excited for that episode as well, and super excited to get going. Please like and subscribe, and look forward to the next one.
You've been listening to Generation AI,
Automating Better Business,
a show from LivePerson.
Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share the episodes you love. Until next time.